Hi guys, welcome to A Cool Dry Place. I'm Joe. So today I would like to do two things. One, I want to give you a little bit of an update on the bandsaw. It's been about a month since we did the bandsaw table and fence. And I've tweaked just a few things on there that has improved it quite a little bit and add a little bit of bling too, I think. But also, maybe more importantly, I want to get this project off of the back burner. This is a concrete water trough, or will be a concrete water trough for out in the garden. And that's kind of why it's been repeatedly put onto the back burner. I actually started this about 5 months ago or so. And that's kind of why I'm doing this too, as my intro for this really sucked. So hopefully this is a little bit better, but it probably isn't much better. But at any rate, I want to have this ripped and ready to go when we get some better weather. I want it to even be, all cast, have the concrete all poured when it gets around to say middle of March or so. Hopefully, I'm looking for about 5 to 7 days or so where we have temperature that's above freezing so that we can pour it. But we're not ready to pour it yet. We've got a few things to do, which will probably be in the next video of some things that we have to do to this whole project to get it going. But what is this? So this, like I said, it's a concrete water trough. These dimensions are approximate. They're not going to be exactly. You'll see it will change a little bit as we move along in the video. But this is going to be a board-formed concrete water trough. Board-formed concrete water trough. So it'll be 3 boards high, made out of, and the exterior formwork is made out of some of the casing and baseboards from my home. I replaced the floors upstairs, and the casing and stuff was pretty dingy and gross, and I just thought I would like to update it. One of those is actually going to be, well, there's a stained glass window that I have that's pretty cool, and I want to do a frame around that I think I'm going to bring you guys in on. But at any rate, I had a whole bunch of these boards, and instead of just throwing them right away, my old baseboards and casing, instead of throwing them away, I thought, hey, why don't I hold on to them? I can maybe use them for something, but they're pretty gross and I don't want to mess around getting the paint off of here. Let's use them on this, because after this, the exterior formwork is probably going to go in the garbage unless if I can find something else to do with it, but I don't really want to cut it or use it in the workshop with all the concrete that might be on those still and sand and stuff. That wouldn't be good for the saw blades. So what I did with this happens to be a piece of casing, but what I did with this is that I bandsawed off this hogged out part here. So this is on the back side of baseboards and casing, as if you don't know, usually they're hogged out in the back here, so that way you'll have one touch point here, which would be, I think this is towards the exterior of the frame, and you have one touch point here that would be towards the interior of the frame. That way if you have some kind of drywall compound or something like that that's kind of sticking out a little bit, you won't have this rock. It'll have just a touch point on the 2 edges here, and it will be a little bit easier to install and look a little bit better and caulk and stuff like that a little bit better. But what I did was I wanted to get rid of that stuff on the back. I didn't want to have that hogged out stuff for the board formed concrete. So I resawed on the bandsaw about 1/8 inch or so off the back of these boards to do 2 things. One, remove the hogged out business here in the casing and the baseboards, but also, and really probably more importantly, to get that bandsawed information onto these boards. Something that I've always liked is old board formed concrete, where you can actually, you can look at the concrete and you can see where the knots were, you can see where some of the defects in the boards were, and you can also see sometimes how that board was cut, whether it was cut with a bandsaw or it was cut with a circular saw, because a lot of times that was taken right from the sawmill. They didn't do any other prepping to those boards. And I think the bandsaw was something I could accomplish here in the shop. If I did a circular saw, I'd have to have a really big circular saw, and I don't, or come at it from both sides, and I didn't want to do that. So bandsaw it was, and I use that to make up our formwork here for the exterior. It's 3 boards high. There was 2 boards about this width, and then one that was a baseboard that was probably 5 or so inches tall. And I think that's going to impart a really neat, interesting texture on the exterior of this water trough. And for me, this water trough is going to do a couple things. Bring some wildlife in, some birds, I don't think rabbits will really get up here, but some birds and some squirrels will probably find it interesting. And I'll kind of enjoy checking those guys out when they're doing it, especially the birds. They're fun to watch. And also, if I can get something like a fountain in there, even maybe one of those like solar ones that just sort of bubble a little bit, I think I'd be happy with that. Just a little bit of a gurgly noise once in a while. And also, it's just going to look cool. The way where I'm going to put it in my garden is right near the gate to get into the backyard. So when visitors come into the backyard and whatever, they'll be kind of like walking right by it. And I just think it will look kind of sharp. Like I say, I started this project probably about 4 or 5 months ago, so it's been kind of repeatedly put on the back burner. But I want to bring you about as much up to date on this as we can. But I think there's certainly some more work that needs to be done to the formwork. Actually, that's not true. The formwork is largely done. There's probably about 10% more, 5% more work to be done to the formwork. But I'm working on, or what we're going to be working on, probably the next video, will be the reinforcements inside of it. So the rebar that goes inside of it, and any kind of a cage, if we built some sort of a cage that goes in there. But first off, hey, let's go over to the bandsaw, and I'll show you what I did on that, and then we'll check out the water trough. I'm sure you guys recall when I put the fence onto the table here that I was having some difficulty getting the fence to be lined up with the blade, parallel to the blade, and parallel to the miter slot, and it just wasn't quite working out. And I was poo-pooing that one of the guys that I saw put the blade, the beam from his combination square up kind of tight to the blade, and then measured off of that to the miter slot to correct it. And I thought that was not a good idea. I thought there was a better way to do it. Well, guess what I did? Yes, that's right. I took the beam out of my combination square and held it up in here, careful to not be on a tooth, and kind of lined it up with the miter slot. Just kind of kept going back and forth measuring. And when I was doing that, I also messed around with the screws down here that hold the bandsaw table onto the trinions that allow it to turn like this, to pivot. And I noticed that, hey, out of the 6 of them, only 2 of them were kind of tight. The other ones weren't even sort of tight. I'm actually surprised. I don't know why it was like that. And it had been like that for years, and I guess I just never noticed. So let me show you what those are. There is, well, on this first trinion, this is the one towards the front of the table. On my saw, this is a Rockwell, but it's basically the same thing as the same thing as a Delta. And I'm sure there's many other ones that are exactly like this. But this has 3 bolts, 2 in the back and 1 in the front here that holds this trinion onto the cast iron table. And exactly the same thing, but opposite back here, where we got 1 bolt in the back and then 2 up towards where the blade is at. And some of them are hard to get. These ones in the back, they are difficult to get to, but that's no excuse. That should have been tight. And I'll bet you dollars to donuts, it was actually this guy right here that did not tighten those up again from whenever that bandsaw was moved last. So what I do, like I said, I just kind of loosen those 6 bolts up down there. Well, I loosened up 2 of them. The other 2 were plenty loose already. And I just sort of kept going back and forth. The bandsaw it is plugged in, so I don't want to be touching it too much. But I just held this up there. And it's probably not going to be crazy accurate, but kind of as I alluded to in the other videos, I don't really expect hyper accurate results from really any bandsaw. There's always going to be some finish work that goes on to a bandsaw. You want it to be repeatable, though. That's kind of what I find with most stuff. Is you want to know that you cut it. If you set everything up, you cut one board this way. If you didn't change anything about your setup, it should be that same way again. So what else did I do? Well, I put some oak from the same batch of oak that this was made of for a sacrificial fence on here. I think it works out pretty all right. Nothing fancy about it, but it does look pretty sharp. And I had this miter gauge. This is actually gill built. This is kind of interesting. I dove just a teeny tiny little bit about this gill built, and it might actually not even be accurate, but it's kind of a neat company. If it is what I think it is, I'll maybe put a link to some kind of article about it. But at any rate, I had this miter gauge. I think it came from the same guy that I bought the table saw from, but I'm not 100%. It's been around for a while. But there's no stops on this at all. When you loosen it up, you're going all the way over or whatever. There's no detents or indexing or anything like that. So I thought it would be just perfect for the bandsaw. I would set it to 90 and probably just keep it there forever. And I just ruined that now. But I put a little bit of a block on there, also the same oak, and then finish these all up the same way. I think it looks pretty sharp. And I have not really used this yet, but I certainly have used the fence. Now let's get on that water trough. All right, just a couple of things before we get ripping on this. One, I have a little bit of experience doing this. I've made some concrete countertops, I've made some concrete sinks, so this is not a daunting project to me. It is probably not, there's a potential for a lot of screw-ups when you're doing concrete stuff like this, but the more you've done it, the more you'll be comfortable with it, maybe you can start to not screw those things up when you do your next one. I can't tell you how many times I did a concrete project and you put a lot of work into the formwork and you pour it, then you wait a couple of days to strip the forms off, and then you're devastated. It looks horrible. Kind of in a similar vein, I made a planter once. I think it was for my mom or something like that, but I made a concrete outdoor planter, and the interior formwork, what we're going to work on here in just a minute, somehow it shifted in relation to the exterior formwork just a little bit. So it was really horrible. You had this, one square that was fine, another square that was fine, except those two squares were not, they did not relate to one another. It was horrible. It was just something I had to throw away. It was junk. And that's kind of devastating when you've put that much work into something. Even if it's not a whole lot of work, you put some work into it, and then you open up strip the formwork off, and you see, oh crap, I got to start completely all over again. Because I treat most of this stuff as lost cast, the formwork. So what I mean by that is, I might be able to get a second pour out of this or a third pour out of the formwork, but probably not. I'm kind of just expecting that the formwork is going to be destroyed in the process of getting the object out. And most certainly the interior formwork, the polystyrene, is going to be garbage. And that's the second point, what I wanted to bring you to, or have you guys understand, is that these dimensions are approximate. And that's because this interior formwork that's made out of polystyrene, the foam boards that you get at, say, the home improvement stores, it's, half inch, 2 inches, that's what this is kind of built up of. We sandwiched a bunch of those polystyrene boards together, glued them together, and then kind of contoured them a little bit to get the block out for this. And then once that block out is done, the interior formwork, that then drives the actual dimensions. So we'll change these dimensions just a little bit once we have this interior formwork settled, I guess, figured out the size of it, and then, adjust or build the exterior formwork as needed. So let's get going. All right, because of the limitations of my shop, it's not real big, I can't actually rip a full 8-foot long board here without running into my miter saw bench, what we're looking at right now. A little bit of a problem, but I got a solution. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this to 48 inches, one of my rips, and then the other rip is over there. We're gonna cut both of these into 48 inches, and then that should be easily manageable on the table saw without running into anything. And then we'll come back here and cut them to the actual size that they need to be. But because they're going to be 23.5 inches in the end, cutting to 48 should be fine. So let's do this. Put my mask on here because this stuff is kind of nasty. Actually, it really doesn't smell bad. I don't smell it at all, but it just clings to everything. So I'd rather not, you know, have it cling to me or inside of me. And one more. All right, folks, I got these ripped down to about a 10 and an eighth. I'm doing this a little bit differently. These are going to end up being, you'll see it here in a minute, but they're going to end up being stacked like this here versus this way. You'll understand a bit better here in the next chunk. But at any rate, I got the miter saw set up here to 23.5 inches. Got my mark set up. Got my stop block my stop block set up. So let's get some stuff on so that we can get this cross-cut size. All right, guys, so we got all these pieces cut up on the table saw and the miter saw, and I put them here like this so you get kind of an idea of how they're going to look when they're all together. So generally, I have done it like this before, and actually never this deep or high. Usually only about maybe that high. You know, kitchen sinks are really only about, even big ones are only about 9 or 10 inches deep or so. I think I did make one that was maybe about 12 inches. But honestly, kitchen sinks, when they get much deeper than that, they become, you know, you got to really get in there. It's a pool. So at any rate, this we're doing this way. I'm doing it this way just because it kind of economically it worked to get this out of the half sheet that I have. And I think it's still going to be fine. So what we want to do is we're going to spray this stuff up. I'm using this stuff here, and I haven't used this before, so I did a little sample to try it out. I used this stuff before. I think it was a 3M product, if I recall correctly. I think it was called Super 77, but I might be wrong. And I did not have problems with it with the foam. One of the problems that you can have with glue, with adhesives like this, is that sometimes they will eat the foam. So I did a little sample over here where I had a couple little extra blocks of foam that I glued up. This has been, about 25 minutes ago. I sprayed this and put it together. And I was afraid, and it actually is eating the foam a little bit, but see if I'm going to pull them apart, because I want to get an idea of how bad it's attacking the foam. I guess I don't particularly care. Gosh, the bond seems to be pretty strong. You know, I don't really care if it eats the foam if it stays intact long enough for it to do its job. And I'm a little concerned because I don't know if you can tell how well some of these pock marks are coming up on the screen here, or picking up on the camera. But those are places where the foam is going in, so it's not making very good. The glue, the adhesive, isn't making very good contact in some of those areas. I am a little concerned about using this stuff. Maybe trying to go find the adhesive. I had to look all over for this stuff the way it was. I don't know why. I guess I don't know why that is. I guess I thought it would have been right there with the glues, but it was in a slightly different area. But you know, this is on there pretty good. So I might just go with it, and because I think this is going to be pretty good. I think it's going to be all right. The thing to be concerned about, or that I'm concerned about with this foam using it in a concrete, and a concrete project like this where I'm going to, well, let's back up a little bit here. So when I did countertops and when I did sinks, I would vibrate the heck out of the forms to get as much air bubbles out as possible. But that's because it's going into a kitchen. Now, I did a project once where I barely vibrate. I was doing a vertical pour for, they're like table stands, and I actually wanted to have some of that texture that I'll see if I can find a picture here and put it up for you. But I wanted to have some of that crazy weird texture that you get in concrete when you don't vibrate at the forms. Especially, this was a pretty tall form. It was, think of it as kind of a wall. It was two curved structures that were maybe about 3.5 feet wide by about, I think they were about table height or there's about, so about 27 to 30 inches tall. And then they're about 3 inches thick, I think. Something like that, and it's slightly curved. Like I say, I'll try to put an image up if I can find it. In that case, I really didn't want to vibrate the heck out of it. I didn't want to shake, get as many air bubbles out of it, because I wanted that visual information to be in there. I wanted that texture to be in there. And that's kind of what I want with this too, as I want it to be, I obviously want it to hold water. That's its entire intent, is it has to hold water. But I think it's going to hold water even if it was kind of craggly and had a lot of those defects on the outside, or what would be considered defects on the outside. But if it has some of that texture, if it has some of those nooks and crannies, like an English muffin on there, it might actually be really nice in the garden, because it will give a place for moss and other stuff to kind of get onto the structure and just add to the kind of patina that I think I'm going for. So I guess where I'm going with this is I think we're going to use this spray adhesive, because I don't think I'm going to vibrate the heck out of it. Oh, the reason why so when you're vibrating the forms, or when you're knocking on it, you're giving a lot of agitation to that form to try to get the air bubbles out. You're also making that concrete with the aggregates, with the little sand and with the little pieces of gravel or the bigger pieces of gravel, work its way into all sorts of nooks and crannies in your formwork, and it will try to destroy it. I've had cases where it goes out through the outside part of the form, and that can be disastrous, but it's not horrible. The worst cases is that you usually get like an edge that it didn't really hydrate very well. So you have an edge that maybe kind of, I'm not a real great concrete guy here, but you get an edge where it lost its smoothness. It doesn't have any kind of smoothness anymore. It sort of starts to resemble a sidewalk at that point. And I don't want that, and most people don't want that in their kitchen. They don't want sidewalks in their kitchens. So if you vibrate it too much, you might get those sands and aggregates to work in between these layers of foam and start to kind of splay them apart. And that could be a little disastrous, because then you'll start to get, like, say for example, if all this other stuff held together really good, but you got a chunk here in the middle where it came apart, and you have a big seam up here. The birds won't care, but if this was something that was going in your home, especially in your kitchen, it would be horrible. You'd have to throw it away and start all over. Now you could possibly grind it and whatever, but it's really hard to grind inside stuff down in here, and you're using diamond wheels, and that's a whole different thing here. But for this here, I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to matter too much. Because I'm not going to be banging the heck out of this to try to get all the air bubbles out. I am trying to get some of it out, and what we'll probably end up doing is shaking the form with just our hands and whacking on it with rubber mallets around the outside. And I have a small trailer that I'm probably going to pour this on out in the garage, and I think I can reach underneath that trailer and whack up on bash up on the underside of that trailer to try to get some of the air bubbles away from the surface. And that's actually what I really kind of care about the most. Is I'd like to have the rim. I know I'm looking down here, but so I'd like to have this rim right here be as close to perfect as possible. I'd like it to have as few air bubbles in this rim as possible. If we get some, 1 or 2, even half a dozen, that's fine. But if we get a whole bunch and it's riddled with just a bunch of air hole or bubbles, that wouldn't be so hot. If they're down here and it's in this sort of area or even on the inside, I don't particularly care. So we're going to go for it. We're going to just spray this stuff up. Okay, guys, it's been about a minute, and there's definitely a slight tackiness to this here, kind of what I would expect from a contact cement when you're just about ready to bond it. But you see right here in this corner, that's what I mean, where it really did attack the foam. Not aggressively, I've seen it do more. That's actually about the only spot where it really seemed to attack the pink polystyrene here. But yeah, well, let's try to put these together. So move those two off to the side. So if you've ever done this before, it says repositionable, but I'm not going to, I'm going to pretend that I didn't read that part here. So I'm trying to line this up so it's kind of in one shot, because usually this stuff goes together and that's it. You don't get a chance to bring it back apart again and reposition things. So I'm going to work under that premise. There is no going back. The seams don't have to be perfect, but it will just mean a little less sculpting if everything is pretty good. And I think that's pretty good. Maybe that isn't good. Golly, there is quite a seam in here, and I don't think that's a problem with the foam or the spray that we used. Maybe it is a problem with the spray that we used. You can see here, this seam is not real good. This is the kind of stuff that if we vibrated the heck out of this to get all the bubbles out, concrete would find its way in there, the sand and all that stuff, and it would start to make this come apart. You see how big of a seam that is? I mean, it's only an 1/8 or a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a fat 1/16, but that is way enough for the water and the concrete, the sand in there to find a way in. I don't know if we put this under a little pressure. It's supposed to be, an instant thing. Well, let's try this one here. Again, line it up about as well as you can and drop it. I don't know. Wow, that one's even worse. Shit, I don't know if I can live with that. All right, folks, I've played with these a little bit and kind of had some thoughts. I've actually tried to pull them all the way back apart again. I can't. Well, I should say I've tried to pull them back apart again, but also I don't want to destroy the edges of this foam or anything like that any more than I've probably already kind of contoured these edges in a little bit, if that makes sense, by pressing here on the edges. But these edges, that gap is not cool. So I think what we're going to end up doing here is I'm going to go with this, and we're going to put these all together as a blank. And then I'm going to probably put some clamps on here and just hope that helps out. And let it sit for a little while, but honestly, I don't think the clamps are going to do anything. And then I think once we've done that, we're probably going to try to coat this somehow to mitigate the seams here. The big problem is that since I'm doing it this way, if you can imagine, this is going to be the form and then 3 more over here. But you're going to see these edges or seams on the end of the trough and also on the bottom of the trough. I mean, you won't really see the bottom of the trough because, well, there'll be water in it. And also, I didn't mention, but I'm going to build like a little raft to kind of float in this trough that will go up and down as the water level goes up and down the trough. And a place for the birds to land and they can do their business. Okay, it's been a couple of minutes. I'm going to put these last two together, and we're going to stick these in some clamps or something. Hey guys, so it's the next day. It's been approximately 21, 22 hours. I know I'm wearing the same clothes, but hey, I'm cheap. And also this next step is going to be really dusty. Well, how did we do? You know, it's not perfect. How well you can see that, but I think the seams may be held together a little bit better being in the clamps like that, but okay, kind of found a quick dirty way here to just keep this from sliding around. So I just clamped this clamp on here loosely just to kind of keep it from moving around a little bit, then I clamp those two down to the workbench here. So let's try it first with just a sanding block. Not perfect. Unfortunately, we're not looking for perfect here. Yeah, look at that. There's definitely why going right in the laundry after all this. So that's pretty okay for this step right here. So, gross. All right, let's mark our center out. So taking a straight edge and putting an X here, line up my outside corners more or less. So, okay. You know what, I think I'm going to even up these edges first. And I have decided too, by the way, that we're more or less keep this shape. So I would like to try to eliminate the writing on here, so we'll probably do a sanding on both sides. Because believe it or not, this writing on here will probably telegraph into the concrete. But let's kind of true up these two ends here as best we can. Now we're going to sand those sides as well. So I don't want to have that waviness. I'd like to try to not have, I'd like to try to have these be about as smooth as I can. I'm not overly concerned about it, but you know, about as well as we can. I'm going to put a dust mask on. Okay, I think I can live with that. So, all right, let's set our compound or our gauge, sliding rule here, whatever it's called. I'm setting it to 1/2 inch, or maybe just a hair shy. And then I'm going to trace around the outside here from the bottom, like so. Boy, that's going to be a lot of draft. Let's change our mind. Let's do closer to about 3/8. And again, this is really just, there's going to be a drain hole here. This is for the once a year when we want to get all the water out and leave it out over the winter time. So that hopefully the water if we get any rains in November or January or any kind of wintertime rains, that hopefully they don't stick around and they're going to drain out of this just as soon as they get into it, as soon as it gets into it. And it won't be a problem causing this thing to freeze and then potentially breaking or cracking. So I think that that's pretty good. So we got a line around the outside here. All right, folks, I found something here, a can of off that's pretty much exactly, well, it's a little bit big. It's a little bit bigger than the stopper, but it'll work for what we need to do here. So I can't see the center here when I put this on it. So what I want to do is I'm going to mark out from the center of the X about 1 inch. In all the directions here. So that way I can probably eyeball my can off a little bit better in the center. So that's not too bad. So just so you get an idea, that's what I did. And then we're going to center the can off here. And I'm going to outline this. It's not perfect, but it'll work. I'm kind of thinking about going, I have another can off that's slightly bigger, and I can just barely see my little tick marks here when I'm covering that up, or when I'm putting this can off on there. So I'm going to also trace this on here too. All right, that's not too bad. Okay, so the idea here with doing that is that we don't want to really sand this area. We want to sand down our sides to this line that we put around the outside here, but we don't really want to touch this center area here because we want, think like a topolary map. We want to have this be higher so that it will, because it's going to be upside down, it'll end up being lower and thus a drain away where the water should likely go to when it drains. All right, guys, I got the vacuum cleaner and the sander set up, and hopefully it doesn't get too gross. I'm just going to clamp this sucker down again so it doesn't move around. If you see, I did add another line here, so I took took a coffee can and I kind of put that in the center there. That gives me an idea of where I need to kind of start flattening out or not taking off as much material. So the idea is I want to kind of go around here, get down to this line about as close as we can. I'm going to get the sander out, and we're going to just do a lot of sanding here. It'll be fun, trust me. You can see that was, all right, you can see that was relatively quick. I had kind of a little bit of, well, keep your pressure towards the outside. I think I was trying to have sort of an even pressure when I was doing this side on the sander, and I kind of dug in then over here, but no sweat. This is, I only wanted to do that outside for right now, and we're gonna use this old guy here again to kind of feather it in and make everything kind of be a little more smooth. Just a little bit of hand sanding, trying not to get the edges. I'm trying to actually hit the near the center now at this point. And I should mention too, I don't even know what grit I was using on this. This was something that was already in the, oh, it's worn off, but I think it was a 120, but it was kind of a worn down 120 grit on the random orbital. And it goes pretty quick. So you see how we worn that down? This was, of course, the side where we came in. I came in a little bit too hard on it, and it worn down just a little bit on this side here too. I'm trying to still preserve as much as I can on this outer side of this line here. I realize that on these two sides, because it's much shorter this direction than it is this, that we're going to get these lines eliminated first, and that's fine, but we're not really trying to eliminate that larger circle at this point. I really just kind of want to blend in what we did around the outside with the random orbital. Try to get rid of any real hard kind of perceived parts here. Yeah, not too bad. All right, this is pretty much done. So now I do not want to have sharp corners here on the outside. So we want to kind of round those over a little bit. So again, we're going to just sand those. Oh. All right, so let's just go around the top here very gently, because if you saw what happened here, I don't even know how that happened. I think I must have just hit it with the, I don't know what, but it's very easy at this point to break off a chunk of this foam. And it'd be a little chunk, but still. I'm gonna try to not have that happen if we can, because that will end up in our concrete then, or we'd have to fill it somehow. So really I'm kind of looking to have a decent radius on this, say about like your thumb here. I want to have a good radius on that. All right, so I'm going to clean up and we'll regroup and figure out what our next step is here. Okay, when you guys weren't looking, I went ahead and filled some of these seams on the interior block out here. So I think the next step is to decide what we're going to do to this. So like I said, I already kind of filled some of these seams a little bit more, and I want to, especially these two outside pieces of foam that shifted the most. Yeah, it's really just these two outside ones. You know, what happened is they kind of came away from one another and they just opened it up, and so the contour has changed a little bit. They're really not too bad on the ends over here, but in the center they're pretty bad. So I only did that a little while ago, fill these seams again, but it seems to have already been pretty dried out. So let's just try to kind of flush those up as best we can, or at least soften it a little bit. I don't want the birds trash talking me when they see this. So this was actually the test that I did. I glued these two polystyrene blocks together with that spray adhesive, and then I had tried to pull them apart, and I was like, hey, okay, that stuff's going to be pretty tough. And then we went for it over here. Any rate, I mixed up a little solution where I used some of that caulking that we did, on this here. I think it's just a latex acrylic with silicone in it. I think it's a DAP product. We'll get it back out in a second here. But I mixed up a solution of that and a little bit of water and stirred it around and painted it on here with a chip brush. It didn't quite fill all the voids, but I had a pretty thinned out solution. The water, even just a little bit of water, makes it a lot thinner than I thought it was going to. So I think what we're going to do is I'm kind of debating about whether to mix up a little thicker solution and try this again on the same piece here, and maybe see if it fills in these gaps a little better, or if we should just go for it. And I'm kind of leaning towards just going for it, because it looks pretty okay. I think I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out here so far. Like I said, let's whip that up. I'll have to go steal a Tupperware container or find something like that, so we can whip up a little batch of that, thicker than I made this. I'm sorry I didn't videotape that. Videotape. Yeah. So let's get on that. All right, folks, I squeezed out some of the, that's what we're using, some of this stuff into a little container. All right, guys, here it is the next day, and overall I'm actually pretty impressed with this. I think that the kind of painting on that acrylic caulk that was thinned out, I think, is probably not a bad idea. However, it has a texture that kind of concerns me a little bit. What I mean by that is that I think that given kind of what I said before about surface adhesion, and that I think that in general it's best if the object can be shiny, because it will help to not get the air bubbles up against surfaces anyway when in the concrete, and hopefully keep our need to whack the form and agitate it to a minimum, and thus hopefully keeping the form from self-destructing. So what I got here is some exterior paint that I got as a mist tint when I was walking through a store. Always check the mist tints. It's a great place to get some good inexpensive paints. So, and I used a different color of this, but I used a color like this for my foundation a couple years ago. It actually worked pretty well. Water beads right up on it. So I figured, hey, why don't I got a bunch of this, why not give it a coat, maybe 2 of this stuff, and help to increase our odds of not having bubbles up right next to this here. Also, too, I was kind of thinking, if we do end up, well, let's just get to paint on this here. If we do end up putting some kind of, I don't know, like sealant inside of this, the concrete, like I was talking about with the Portland cement, kind of painting the interior of the Portland, painting the interior of this trough with a Portland cement. I really don't think that would be the end of the world. I'm actually kind of maybe leaning into that a little bit more as I have thought about it, that if we did paint this interior either with a Portland paint or with a type of product, that it might not be that bad. I guess the reason I'm kind of thinking that is that the concrete's going to be porous, and I don't know how much And we want it to hold water, obviously. That's the whole point of making this water trough, is we want it to hold water. I don't know how much water might actually push through the concrete vessel itself. I really haven't experimented with that much. I've made some concrete sinks, but you know, if you're thinking you really don't have a concrete sink full of water, at least not for that long. In fact, most folks probably don't even fill up their sinks at all. I don't think I ever have, unless if it was on accident. In recent days, at least that I can remember. So if we did paint the inside with some kind of material, that wouldn't be altogether horrible, although I would want it to be, I guess I wouldn't want it to look obvious. I want it to blend in with what this material is, concrete. So that's why I would hope that a concrete paint, like a Portland, making a paint out of Portland, or something like that might be the way to go. But I kind of also think that's something that we can do later. Don't have to worry about it now. We can give this thing a couple months out in the elements and revisit that whole thing and say June. Or maybe May, but you know, give it a little while to so we can kind of test and see if indeed it's necessary for some kind of water blocker to be applied to the inside. So, well, at any rate, I'm going to paint the rest of these three sides and let that dry out. I have a couple other things on the bench that we need to get on, so maybe we'll work on those after I get this done. I did add one more coat of that dark gray paint to that interior formwork, but that pretty much concludes that. We should be done with that. We'll be able to move on to the exterior formwork, which I'm pretty stoked to be doing, but that's going to be next week. So please hit subscribe down below so you don't miss out on that, and thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it.